and you're like waiting for it to start to heat up, and then all of a sudden you begin to smell what's happening with the story, and then pretty soon you can't wait for it to hurry up and end because you want to see how this thing is going to play out. Now, what didn't work for me was some of the exposition that led to the climax. I mean, the pieces come together really, really fast, but I would have liked to know more as to why this was occurring, and more importantly, who set this in motion. Now, the film is rated R because there are scenes of violence and there is some sexual situations. And when it comes to the Aristotle index, you have to throw it out. You know, when it comes to horror movies, all things that are likely impossible are impossible or possible, whatever. But that's what makes them so good. You suspend your disbelief and you wonder if what you're seeing is actually possible. And everything in this movie seems possible, which is what makes it so unsettling. IMDb gave it an extremely strong 7.0. Rotten Tomatoes gave it an 80%. The audience score was 63. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact because it was such a slow burn. For me, on the old Cinema and Cocktails rating, I gave it a 4 out of 5. This movie is a solid 2 hours. The story is depressing at some times, but at its core, it's a story about failure. It's not funny, but there are a few moments of some awkward humor. So it emotionally pulls you in different directions while putting pressure on you to try to figure out why these events are unfolding. There are no real clues as to what's going on. So the story plays out kind of like a tale from the Brothers Grimm. You know, those stories that had like a moral at the end of it. And it's constantly reminding us about the morality, about the decisions that we make. Have you ever stepped on a rusty nail? Like, you don't really know how much damage you've done to your foot until you look down and realize, oh my God, did I break the skin? Is it a puncture? Was it a rusty nail? It's like you don't really know what you've done until you really assess the damage. And that's kind of like, to me, one of the themes that's in this movie. Like, you don't really know what's coming down the line based upon the decisions that you make early on in your life or through the course of a day or the course of a week. And so the rusty nail, I thought, was a perfect fitting cocktail. Now, when you make a rusty nail, it's essentially 2 ounces of blended scotch, 1 ounce of Drambuie, and a lemon twist. What is Drambuie? Drambuie is a liqueur that you can find at most liquor stores, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's a sweet golden color liqueur made from Scotch whiskey, honey, herbs, and spices. The recipe goes back like hundreds of years. And when you make it, I mean, essentially what you're doing is you're putting yourself almost like a double shot of scotch, okay? But what's cool about it is that the honey and the sweet flavor kind of covers it up along with the lemon. So as you're sipping on it nice and slow, it kind of sneaks up on you. And it's a very slow burn that takes time getting into, and like you don't even realize what you've done until you've had your second or third rusty nail, and then you realize, whoa, this is a pretty powerful drink. And that slow burn, I think, is very similar to the movie, The Killing of a Sacred Deer. It's a slow burn that, once you kind of see as the plot unfurls itself, you realize that some of the decisions that people make in their lives, the impact of what happens down the road, can have devastating consequences. What do The Exorcist, The Walking Dead, and every other movie that has little girls being possessed by demons have in common? The Wailing, okay? This movie combines so many horror ingredients blended perfectly together. I mean, man, it makes for a hell of a thrill ride. So essentially what the movie's about is that soon after a stranger kind of arrives to like this small village in Korea, a mysterious sickness starts spreading, and this police guy is drawn into the incident, and he's trying to solve the mystery. And, that will ultimately lead him to trying to save his daughter. Yeah. It's an interesting ride, man. It's an interesting ride. The characters, before I go any further with these characters, let me just stop right here. I don't know these people. Okay. You know what, when you do an international film like this, that is subtitled, by the way. This is kind of tricky. So just bear with me on this one. Do-won Kwak is a Korean born actor with about 27 credits. He plays the cop, all right, named Jong-gu, mostly international movies. I did not see him pop up on anything that may have possibly been inside American theaters or anything of recent note. Jung Ming Hwan plays Il Guan. He's got about 42 credits to his name. Now, apparently, I didn't know this, but Jung Min is one of the highest grossing movie stars in South Korea. Okay. And there's he's got a couple of really big movies, something called Ode to My Father and Veteran, and of course, The Wailing. The only guy who really kind of pops up in American cinema is the older gentleman named Jun Kunimura. Now he has 192 credits to his name, and he is simply referred to as the Japanese man. And I'll get to that in a moment, but he's just referred to as the Japanese man. Now he's been in Midway. He was also in Kill Bill Volume 1 and Volume 2. You probably might recognize him. He was Boss Tanaka. I think, was he the one that Lucy Liu cut his head off? I can't remember, but he was one of those guys at that table in that one scene when she anybody that wants to, and she chopped that dude's head off and headed up in the air. It might have been him. I don't know. He was also in Black Rain way, way back in the day opposite Michael Douglas, but he's probably more renowned over in that part of the world for this horror movie called Audition. Yeah. Now, I haven't done Audition. I could have done Audition, but I chose not to do Audition because, Audition, when you look up all-time greatest horror movies, Audition is top 5. It's way up there. It is, man, that's one of the more disturbing films I've ever seen. So I'll just leave it at that. As far as the character arc goes, okay, the main character, we're only going to focus on one because it's basically about him. The main character, Jong-gu, who's the cop, is he's trying to take care of his daughter. Okay. And at times he's trying to take care of his daughter and also solve the mystery of what has befallen this particular village. And what's cool about it is his character at times seems a little bit slapstick and comedic, but I thought his performance as a bumbling police officer was just all too real. Sometimes when we see, especially when it comes to American cop movies, we see these guys that, they're tough dudes. They got their bulletproof vests on, or they got they got the shield hanging from their chest. They got they have this swag and this demeanor. This dude was look, I'm just a cop and I am coming across something that I cannot explain, and it is scaring the hell out of me. Okay. He played a generally scared cop. He reacted scared. He acted scared. He was agitated. He was confused. He was bumbling at times. I thought it really gave him depth and personality as he tried to make sense of the insanity that had befallen his family and everything around him. Now, as far as the other main character, the Japanese man. So, historical sidebar. I thought it was interesting that they made one of the antagonists in this film a Japanese man, especially citing the unfortunate history between the Japanese and the Koreans. I mean, the Koreans really have not forgotten about the Japanese occupation during war times. And so for them to, for lack of a better term, demonize the Japanese man, I thought it was an interesting take. And I don't necessarily want to get into a discussion about how one race kind of views the other as something that's horrible and negative. But it's very interesting the way, that was kind of symbolized in this movie. Now, the dialogue, the movie is subtitled, so you really have to pay attention to what's going on and what the characters are saying to each other. As far as the subtext goes, there's a lot of deep implications behind what's going on and what's being discussed in this movie. It's one thing to deal with American subtext. It's another thing when you're dealing with Korean subtext, okay? Especially with the allegory of mysticism and supernatural forces. A lot of the anecdotes are used to explain the circumstances that have occurred with this cop and his family and the individuals inside the surrounding village. As far as the type of conflict that's in this movie, man, human versus supernatural. I don't want to say human versus God, but that's an interesting idea. I could explore that. When it comes to the supernatural, Jung-gu is up against something, and I don't know what it is. There are priests involved. There's shamans involved. There's angels. There's demons. I mean, it's all here. It's a buffet of supernatural beings, and Jung-gu is really trying to get through it all. Now, when it comes to humans versus God, I don't want to make it seem like it's a conflict with him and God, but I will say that his faith is tested. Okay. And at different moments in all of our lives, we've found ourselves questioning God's mercy, his purpose, his rationale for things that occur in our life. And so there really isn't so much of a conflict as it is just trying to figure out, why is this happening to me? And that takes us into our plot. It's kind of along the lines of a why done it. There's a scene where, Jung-gu goes to I believe a priest or a member of the clergy, and he's just trying to figure out why things are happening. And the anecdote that is told to him is subject to is subject to your interpretation as the viewer. And I won't get into it because it's a potential, spoiler, but I will find myself still wondering, why was this occurring? Why did this have to happen? And on the other side of that plot type, I thought it was definitely a dude with a problem. I mean, Jung-gu has a big time issue, but it's not for any particular reason. That's where the whole why thing comes into play, So it's interesting. It's interesting the way they use that type of storytelling device to invoke such terror throughout the movie. Thematically, it's good versus evil. It's literally that simple. Okay. This is something that will test your faith as a viewer, because my faith was tested because the question is, can you sit through this entire thing? Now the film itself also similar to like The Killing of a Sacred Deer. It's a little bit unbalanced, but not so much in the beginning of the movie. The imbalance of this movie is towards the middle, because in the first act, it jumps right at you right away. Okay. I mean, the first act is short with the first death appearing very, very quickly. Okay. After that, in the second act, there's sightings, weird deaths, the whole issue behind the Japanese guy. All those things are highlighted in the second act. In the middle act, man, midway through, there's a exorcism scene. Oh, unbelievable. Boy, that was tough, okay? And finally, in the third act, Jung-gu's faith is tested with the climax and the ending reveal to all the decisions that he made throughout the movie. Now, the director is a guy named Hong Jin-na. And for a guy that's only had about 5 movies under his belt, man, this thing was amazing, okay? It's hard to discuss the artistry of such a gruesome film, but the technical skill through which he navigated this close-ups of the carnage gives you such an unsettling and disturbing feeling. I mean, you never feel truly relaxed as you go from scene to scene to scene, wondering what the hell is going on and why is it about to happen? I mean, even the Japanese man's costume was just unsettling. The exorcism scene, it was just bizarre. The creatures that you see are constantly have you saying WTF. I mean, the editing and the transition from the horror occurring inside the house to outside the house, I mean, it really gives you no chance to catch your breath. So in that regard, Hong Jin-na he nailed it. He nailed it. Now, what worked in this movie was the absolute sheer terror of not knowing what is going on. And that, to me, scares you the most. I mean, the unknown really keeps you on the edge of your seat at all times. What didn't work is some possibly could call this kind of horror porn. I mean, there were some scenes that were just so gruesome at certain points. It's just like, you had to look away unless you're just that guy or that woman that can handle, that kind of gore. It was rated R. Why? Because of the sex. There's some sex in here. So you gotta, if you're watching it with the kids, be cool. There's a sex scene in here. There's some death imagery. There are some gruesome scenes of carnage. I mean, the whole film it's just like I said, it has its moments. It comes and goes. And as far as the likely impossibility, it's so wonderfully done. Man, you don't question anything. You let this movie play and you hope for the best. It has an extremely highly rated 7.5 from IMDb. Rotten Tomatoes gave this movie a 99%. This movie damn near got 100. That's how good this movie is. As far as the audience score, they gave it an 81. And I think a lot of that had to do with it being just a little bit confusing. My cocktails and my cinnamon cocktails rating, man,